I'd now like to move on to our second speaker, who is Mrs. Mary Mellor. Mary Mellor is an emeritus professor at the School of Arts and Social Sciences at Northumbria University in Newcastle. She has published extensively on money and finance, financial exclusion, cooperation, sustainable cities, ecofeminism, and socialist economics. Her most recent books are The Future of Money, From Financial Crisis to Public Resource, and then The Politics of Money Towards Sustainability and Economic Democracy, and Feminism and Ecology. Her proposal for a steady state economy rests on breaking down the barriers between the money and non-money economy and the democratization of the money system. She's going to talk about a very interesting theme today, and she's very conversant with this. She's got it, really. It's called Democratizing Money, From Austerity to Sufficiency. Mary, you have the floor.
Right, it's just standing up. I'm not so close to the microphone. I've been asked to talk about my ideas on money and how they relate to the degrowth issue, but also very much touches on what the previous speaker was talking about, which is this huge amount of debt that is built up. And what I'm suggesting is a way we can get to degrowth in terms of the crisis we're in. So that's the link between austerity and degrowth. So let me just take you through this. What do I see as austerity? Well, this is what we're living through, and Greece more than any. Degrowth as market failure, degrowth in money value as GDP goes down. And this is what I think is most important, an attack on public expenditure and public money. And this is a concept we've lost completely. And in fact, we lost the concept of public money on that graph that you saw before, where the debt just took off. Was when we lost the concept of public money, the debt took over. And I want to kind of explain why that happened. And I see this in terms of the ideology of handbag economics. If you remember, we had a lady called Margaret Thatcher in Britain who always carried a handbag. So it's that kind of thinking, the Thatcherite neoliberal thinking. Handbag economics. This sees the public as being like a housewife who's waiting on money to be given to her before she can feed her starving children. So this is my idea of handbag economics. I'll explain what I mean. Austerity is linked to this theory of handbag economics, the whole neoliberal notion, which sees the state, which means the public, us, collectively, as dependent on an external source of money, the market. Therefore, states and the public, standing for the state, or the state standing for the public rather, can only increase expenditure by borrowing from the commercial sector, from the financial sector. In fact, states are being forced to borrow from the very banks they're trying to rescue, effectively. And this denies that the state, and therefore the public, can be a source of money in its own right. Now, if you were talking in the 1950s, you would quite accept the state could create money in its own right. It's only since the 70s and the complete switch over to neoliberal ideology that we've got this ideology of the state as housewife. Just looking at what the public had to do, it doesn't come out very clearly, but if you take that big segment at the bottom where, sorry, I'll walk up to it. You've got the segment at the bottom. That is the cost of World War II. All those things up there are the Marshall Plan, the Korean War, New Deal, Iraq War, NASA's adventures in space. All those up there come in the colorful area at the top. The big area on this side that takes from the top over to down here I should get my hands in the right place. That is the cost to the public of the bailout. So the public has stood globally to spend as much money on this bailout as we spent on World War II. That's how bad it is. What I want to see as an alternative to this is the concept of sufficiency. That my view of degrowth is sufficiency, which is enough for all. And sufficiency is very much about equality, because sufficiency can't be sufficiency for one, it's sufficiency for all. Enough has to be enough for all. And we know people have more than enough, not enough. So I think enough is a principle of social justice. And I would see that as a needs-led economy, which starts with what people need, not what they're grasping for or want. Obviously ecological sustainability, or else you wouldn't all be sitting here. And how do we achieve sufficiency degrowth, that is non-market failure degrowth, but real degrowth without austerity? And how do we get from the market economy we're in now to what I call the real economy? Economists tend to talk about the real economy as production, about real goods and services. But the real economy isn't just about production, it's about all of us in all of our lives. So the way I see it is like this. We live within an ecosystem, and the central darker bit in the middle is the money-based economy. Everything we do for money. But outside of that lies all the domestic and community work we do, which I call women's work, although it's not necessarily all done by women. In the bottom is the non-market economy, people who live outside the market sector, live in the community and all the community services people give. And of course, what lies outside the market as well is ecosystem damage the market doesn't pay for. So my focus is on how do we overturn the destructive growth dynamics at the heart of the value economy and rescue it for sufficiency. So that's my plan. I see this as a kind of money divide. On the left-hand side here are all the things that money pays for, what we think of as economic man, who may be a woman. I'm not making a complete division between men and women here. Market value, I'm reading down the left side now. Market value, personal wealth, able-bodied workers, labor and intellect, exploitable resources, tradable knowledge. That's all inside the valued economy. But what's outside? Outside is this whole area of the domestic world, women's work, subsistence, social reciprocity, the life of the community, the sick, the needy, the old, the young, the body. We have to look after our body for 24 hours, not just the hours we're at work. Ecosystem and wild nature, and feelings, emotions, wisdom. This all lies outside of that market. So our sustainable sufficiency society is going to be based on that side, not this side. So how do we get out? What economic model do we use to get from that side to that side? Well, we can abandon money and go back to subsistence. A lot of people are talking about this. Or we can have local markets and local money. A lot of people are talking about that. Both, I'm not knocking those as ideas. I mean, that's a possibility. But for our big, complex societies, large-scale societies, I don't think it's practical. So I think we've got to go for the big one. We've got to go for changing the dynamics of the big economy. We've got to work at the level of the money system, and therefore we've got to democratize our money system. We've got to get back to the idea of public money, money for the public, money for sustainability. Now, how do we do that? You've got to start by asking, what is money? Where does it come from? And nobody asks this. They all take money for granted. It's just there. It comes out the sky. It falls out of trees. Economics, very, very rarely do you see economists actually discuss what money is and where it comes from. They just take it as a given. It's just there in the economy. And there's lots of economic myths. I won't go into these in detail, but these are all incorrect, and they are at the heart of nearly all economics textbooks. That money emerged through trade, that money is only a medium of exchange, that money originally had its own value, hence gold, in things like gold and silver coinage, that banks link up savers and borrowers, and that states cannot create wealth. Those are the current economic myths, and they're all wrong. Every one of them is wrong. I haven't got time to go into that in detail, but some ideas. For instance, that money evolved in trade. Money has existed in human communities long before market societies as such. For instance, the Yap people of Micronesia, this is money. They use as money. And money, for most of history, has been social. It's been to do things like injury payments to people. It's been to do with dowries. It's been to do with tribute to leaders. It hasn't been to do with markets and market value. So most societies, there is such a thing as non-market money. Most human societies have had some means of measuring, registering, and transferring entitlements and obligations. And these aren't to do with the market, they're not to do with profit, they're not to do with gain, they're not to do with efficiency. And as I said, originally used for things like injury payments and dowries. And it's taken many forms, from hieroglyphic records to clay tablets to beads or shells or gold coins, for that matter. So money is much bigger than the economists have traditionally told us. For instance, coinage. The tale from the economists is that coinage emerges in markets because markets were inefficient without coins. But in fact, coinage has always been public money. Rulers have held on to coinage right through history. And even today, it's the state, the central banks, who can issue coinage. Banks themselves, your high street bank can't issue coinage. It has to buy it off the central banks or the state. So let's think about public money. What is public money? Because this is central to my notion of how we can be sustainable. It's issued by a political or social authority, originally, historically, by temples and by rulers, by palaces. But now we've got things like in Britain, we have a royal mint. I don't know what you would call it in Greece, but we have mints, we have the treasury, we have the central bank. These are common to most countries. Now, the important point about public money, which brings us to the question of debt, is that public money has always been debt-free at the point of issue. That is, it has been created by a public authority, not necessarily democratically. Through history, most of it was used to go to war or build great palaces. And I mean, it was wasted by the public. I'm not saying it was used by the rulers. I'm not saying it was used well. But the point is, it was created by the ruler, spent into circulation, and then retrieved as taxation. And that is the way round, and that's very important. That you understand that the money was issued first, then it was taxed back. And that has become very central to my notion of sustainability and degrowth. So circulation was based on trust of the authority. And still, money is the same. You trust the bank, you trust the central bank, just about. You trust the euro has authority. There's nothing behind the euro bar the institutions that issue it and circulate it. Now, money, as I say, can take any form. It can take, in modern times, obviously coin and notes, but tally sticks were very big up until the 19th century in Britain, and I dare say they were right across Europe, which I'll show you a picture in a minute. The modern version of public money, of course, is quantitative easing. This money they're releasing into to the banks to try and make them solvent again. That's a tally stick. These were used very extensively for the payment of taxes and also for trade. And that was used extensively, so that some figures, say from the 1600s in Britain, say that these were as common as coinage. And that was money. So, I mean, you can make your money out of sticks. Think how much public control you've got if you can make your money out of sticks. What's the problem then with bank-issued money? Because that's what we live under at the moment. Now, bank-issued money did originate in trade. It's nothing to do with coinage. Coinage has always been dominated by rulers. What the trade generated wasn't coinage money, it was credit. It was debt and credit. This is at the heart of the banking system developing out of the trading system. Again, I haven't got time to go into the history of it to explain exactly how that happened. But the point is that banks do create money, but they can only create money as debt. because they're not going to give it away, are they? I mean, the whole point of being a bank is you give people money and you ask them to give it you back and a bit more besides as interest. Now, money theory has wrongly assumed that bank loans are a transfer between your deposits and a borrower. But this is absolute rubbish. There is just not that connection. Because you go and put your money in the bank. Notice there it's actually coinage, which you could only get off the state anyway. But you could put it in the form of notes, or you could put it in the form of dots. However you put your money in, it can be electronic or whatever, you put your money in the bank. Now, if the bank was a link between savers and borrowers, this would happen. Somebody would take a 25-year mortgage, and the depositor's money is gone. Now, okay, one or two the money of depositors could be gone, and some other depositors would be there. But taken as a whole system, if you've got debts, which far outstrip deposits anyway, then presumably everybody's deposits are gone, because they've gone in 25-year mortgages. But that isn't the case. No matter how much the bank has issued, you can still get your deposit back. So money is in two places at once. Because, in fact, there is a massive money creation question going on here, all as debt. And this has been said quite clearly by John Kenneth Galbraith, back in famous American economist in 1975. The process by which banks create money is so simple, the mind is repelled. But take a more modern one, the Financial Times, Martin Wolf, the Financial Times. The essence of the contemporary monetary system is the creation of money out of nothing by private banks, often foolish lending. And that is the truth about the economy you've lived under, why we're so heavily in debt, including states being in debt, because states are no longer allowed to create their own money. They have to borrow it off the banking system, and they can only borrow it as debt. So that is the problem. And look what they did in this takeover, because the takeover happened round about the 1970s, when we had deregulation, but also money was mainly electronic. Now, when money is mainly notes and coin, there's a bit of a public control on it, because the public sector, the central bank or the treasury are the only people who can produce notes and coins. So if you predominantly need a lot of notes and coins, there's a public control on money issue. But round about the 1970s, we had deregulation, plus we nearly all started only using bank money. We started mainly only using our bank accounts and using checks and credit cards. And that's when the banking ability to issue money and debt just took off. And the bottom line there is GDP, the top line is the money supply. The money supply went completely out of control. So much so that our money supplies are being privatised. Across the world, the money supplies are being privatised. In Britain, the balance between notes and coin and bank-created money is 97% of our money has been created as debt, and only 3% or thereabouts, and some people say less, as notes and coin. So, in fact, we have had a total privatisation of money supplies around the world. This is our problem. We've got a totally unbalanced economy. This is Britain. That big, long one is the financial sector. And I think you won't be as bad, because you haven't got in Greece, you haven't got a big financial sector. It's only 2 times GDP. In fact, you're quite healthy, really, believe it or not. Britain, that could be Cyprus. Britain, when Britain's saying, oh, Cyprus, tut, 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 Britain's in a worse position than Cyprus, I think. It's an offshore tax haven that's taken in too much money and created too much debt. And again, I'm using this for Britain. You're much healthier in Greece in this thing. The bottom one is ordinary businesses. The middle one is households. The top one is the financial sector. So what's happened is the financial sector has been creating money and lending it to itself, mainly to itself, and then lending it to states and impoverishing all of us. I just show you the debt distribution. That big one on the left with the massive green bit in the middle is Britain, with all the debt of the banking sector. Government is the little yellow one. So all the fuss about government debt. Japan is the one that's got quite a lot of government debt, and it has done since its crash. Europe is the fourth one along, is Europe, and Greece would be somewhere between Japan and Europe. You haven't got an indebted financial sector, you haven't got an indebted personal sector, but you do have an indebted government sector. So the crisis wasn't caused by sovereign debt, it wasn't caused by public debt, it wasn't caused by non-financial firms, it wasn't really even caused by households except for mortgages. It was created by the financial sector lending to itself and paying itself huge bonuses for doing it. And obviously we've suffered more from that in Britain than you have in Greece. You didn't manage to have an asset double. In fact, the crisis got you out of that, really. Otherwise, you might have had one. The banks are out of control. I won't go into details, I haven't got time. Why did the state step in? It was bank money. It was froth money. Why did the state step in? Because the people who had all this money that the banks have created don't understand it's bank money. They think it's real money. And the whole security of the money system had to be sustained, and to sustain the security of the money system, you had to save the banks, which was the problem. It's because the two systems were tied up, and that's why we got the mess. So how do we get from debt to austerity then? I think debt-based money, the problem with where this relates to growth is if all your money is issued as debt, then it's all got to be paid back, and it's all got to be paid back with interest. Now, where is all that energy, where is all that economy, where is all that dynamism going to come from? Basically, it can't come from anywhere. There is nowhere to get the extra money. So if you've got a debt-based system, you've got permanent growth, permanent demand, you need a permanent expansion of the money supply, because what you're relying is on new people taking out debt so that some more money is issued into the economy, and then the first people can start paying their debts off. It's a growth dynamic system. And it's all based on the neoliberal ideology that there can be no public money, there's only to be debt money. In fact, this is probably the most strange thing I'm going to say. But in fact, all this thing they're going on about deficit, there must never be deficit. Everybody must pay their way. This is handbag economics. Everybody must pay their way, live within your means. This is rubbish. If the issuer of money must never take all the money back, otherwise there is no money to circulate. The problem with the banking system, it wants all the money back and more. But where's the new money going to come from if the only money being issued is through the banking system as debt? This is the dilemma we're in. So handbag economics misunderstands completely how a money system works. And of course, there is deficit in the banking system because it comes as default. Because when people can take no more debt, they default, and that becomes a deficit within the banking system. So this is how to express it. A public money system issues a lot of money into the economy and only takes some of it back as tax. It has to take some of it back, otherwise you would get problems with inflation. What does a bank system do, a bank system based on debt? It gives you out a certain amount of money, and it wants more money back because it wants all that money back plus interest. So it is always sucking money out of the system. So as soon as people stop taking out debt, the system will collapse in on itself. Because the bank, just before the crash in Britain, we were increasing our money supply by 17% over each month. Well, not 70% over what was taken last month, not 17% totally every month. But it was figures of 17%. At the end of the crisis, we were contracting by 8%. And our money supply has been contracting and contracting and contracting. So how do we get to democratize money then, in order to get to a degrowth society? Control of money supply needs to be taken back from the banks. All new money should be issued free of debt on the basis of democratic priorities. And private investment, the financial system, should be based on what it says it does now. Real money being transferred between investors, the savers and investors. Real money transfer. That isn't what's happening at the moment. I'm sorry I'm going through this very fast. There's a lot of theory behind this, but I can't say much more. Because obviously time will be up on me. So I want a sufficiency economy. I want an ecologically sustainable, socially just economy, which cannot exist without a source of democratic, social or public debt-free money or a social accounting system of some form. And I want it to be based on provisioning. I want this to embrace all aspects of human nourishing, currently paid and unpaid, and it should be organised through the mutual meeting of human need, with money as a mechanism of doing so. I want it to be like a babysitting circle. I don't know if you have babysitting circles in Greece, but the perfect money system, and what a money system should be, is a babysitting circle. And this is why it's feminist economics, because women understand babysitting circles. What happens in a babysitting circle is you first get some cards, you cut them up, and whoever's in your babysitting circle, you give them so many tokens. You give 10, say, to each family. And then you start trading, and you start exchanging. The point isn't to make money. The point isn't to lend tokens. The point isn't to make a profit. The point isn't to hoard them. If somebody does nothing but babysit, like Germany, German babysitters are doing all the babysitting, taking in all the tokens, and not asking anybody to babysit for them. This is what Germany's doing at the heart of the Eurozone. It's sucking in all the euros, and then it's only lending them you back. A babysitting circle, the point is you give each other the service of babysitting. You don't hoard. It's a balanced economy. And if it doesn't work, if it's not a balanced economy. That's local money. That's another thing we could have. This is my last slide. I want people's money. I want people's money for democratic priorities. I want it for needs-led expenditure. I want it for public infrastructure. I want community and specialist banks. I want not-for-profit services and production. I want a basic income. And I also want an income allocated to the environment. I want the environment in its wild state to be able to have a salary to preserve it in that condition. So I want banks to do what they say they do, that is take in real money and lend out real money. But new money must come into the economy only through the people. You cannot live on bank-issued debt. It's quite logically, as well as every other moral value, but it's logically impossible. The system cannot exist. Right.